So Nick, you want them to message you directly on the chat for
Yeah,
questions?
I think that would be just a little easier. So we're not going to have a lot of people jumping in. I'm just going to read them as they are, and if there are like multiple questions, we don't have to ask the same question over and over again.
And Nick, you're also, I just want to clarify, your screen name on here is Buena Park Neighbors. So people need to message Buena Park Neighbors.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, not Nick Ramos.
Oh.
Rosa, I did the same thing with my talking points.
Rosa, do you have a henna
Nick.
tattoo?
What's
that?
Is that a henna tattoo?
Yeah, you know what? It's from it's not real.
Oh.
It is though, I forgot.
Was it one of those that washes off after a couple hours or something?
No, it's supposed to hang on for like a week, I guess. It didn't wash off. I showered once in it already. So it was like a bridal shower I went to. They were doing it.
Oh, very cool.
Nick, what's the official title we have for you? Government liaison?
I think it varies.
Spackle, fill the gaps.
I think it's like government agencies liaison.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, maybe we should cut the agencies from it.
You put government liaison.
Government affairs liaison.
Well, whatever you guys are feeling that time.
We're a lobbyist.
All right. It's about that time. We have a healthy group in the waiting room.
And then who's spotlighted first? Is it just to tee it up, or pinned? Is it Alex and Rosa and you?
Rosa. And then from Rosa, we'll go introducing, I believe, Alex. And then Alex will go introducing the developer and so on.
I'll introduce the alderman.
Oh, yeah. Do we want to go with Rosa first then, and then the alderman?
Rosa first. Yeah, so Rosa, me, alderman,
and then
yeah, and then developer. Yep.
All right.
Actually, why don't we go Rosa, me, alderman, bring it back to me, and then I'll introduce the developer. Yeah. We'll do it that way. That works. Updating your official agenda, Rosa.
Right. Very official.
Okay. Well, here we go.
And should we just jump right in and get right started?
Maybe give it like a minute.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Has Rolando logged on yet?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, cool. Great. Just making sure everybody's here.
Am I good to go?
Yeah, I think we're good to go, Rosa.
All right, thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Rosa. I'm the president of Buena Park Neighbors. Today, we're hosting a town hall in regards to the Immaculata development on Bittersweet. While new developments often bring positive results to a community, we do understand that there are also concerns that come with that. Buena Park Neighbors wants to hear everyone's opinions, concerns, and whatnot. So this is the reason that we are hosting a town hall, and maybe our first town hall in regards to this development, depending on how things go. We will continue to do what we can to make sure the most voices in the neighborhood can be heard. That being said, we did invite James Kappelman, the alderman for the 46th ward. He's here tonight with us, and he'll speak to you about how developments are brought to him and how decisions are made. We also have Rolando, who is representing the developer, and he has a full presentation on what the current development looks like. And he also has a team with him, and hopefully they'll be here to answer questions and whatnot during the Q&A. Alex Walking is with us today, and he represents Buena Park Neighbors for the Zones and Development Committee that is under the James Kappelman's 46th ward. So we do want all voices to be heard, as I mentioned, and hope to answer as many questions as possible. So that being said, throughout the presentation, if you do have questions, please reach out to Nick Ramos. He is our government liaison with Buena Park Neighbors. You would direct chat him to Buena Park Neighbors. He would be behind the scenes there. Thank you, Nick, for that. And he is going to be facilitating the Q&A. So again, a direct message to him if you do have a question. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Alex Walking, who's going to also talk to you in regards to how Buena Park Neighbors would make a decision if this comes to a vote. And part of it is this town hall is step number 1. So Alex, take it away.
Thank you, Rosa. I appreciate the warm welcome. Well, good evening, everybody. As Rosa mentioned, my name is Alex Walking. I am the representative for Buena Park Neighbors on the 46th Ward Zoning and Development Committee. I have been in communication with the developer about this, with the developer's attorney, Rolando Acosta, about this project, and I've received a number of emails from you. I've received letters from condo associations. I've received phone calls, and I appreciate all the feedback that you all have given. So here's the process that Buena Park Neighbors has elected to follow, and it's been modeled after a few different block clubs and their decision-making process. So when this development came before us about a year ago, a little over a year ago, February, right before the pandemic and our worlds changed, the initial development was brought before us at a Buena Park Neighbors meeting. Throughout most of the pandemic, we have not heard much from the developer, and they have since resurfaced, and they are now bringing this development before us. And they are meeting with several other block clubs, with their town halls, with everybody else that's around this development that is immediately affected by it. So what Buena Park Neighbors has decided to do is we did an initial community feedback form. Some of you received this in the newsletter. Some of you heard about it from your neighbors or condo associations. Some of you may have seen it on social media. So that community feedback form brought in 156 responses as of today. Those responses were then sent to the developer's attorney, again, Mr. Acosta, and the feedback form has brought about 3 main concerns. I sent this feedback form to Mr. Acosta last week, and I highlighted what the main 3 topics were that came up. Number 1 was the height and density of the project. Many people felt that the height, the building was too high, it blocked a lot of sunlight, and it brought about a number of other concerns. Being number 1 was parking and the lack thereof, or the disappearance of parking that many people on Bittersweet need or currently use Immaculata as parking lot for. And then finally, the traffic concern. Some of the traffic study that we have seen before, for those of you who are new to this development or have not heard of this before, if this is your first town hall hearing about this development, one of the main concerns has been traffic. The most recent traffic study that we've reviewed was done during the pandemic, and it did not factor in traffic prior to the pandemic. So I brought these concerns to Mr. Acosta and asked him to speak specifically about these concerns this evening, in addition to any other changes that have been made about or with respect to Immaculata. Without further ado, I will turn this over to Alderman Kappelman and let him speak briefly about the 46th Ward Zoning and Development Committee and what you can expect as far as a vote goes. And before I get into that, I will say right now, Buena Park Neighbors does not have an official position on this. We wanted to have this time with all of you to garner your feedback. We want to hear from you. We want to hear from everyone in Buena Park. And only until we need to, this goes before the committee for a vote, will we take a position in which we will ask you all to vote. Because when I have to go vote on behalf of Buena Park Neighbors, I'm going to want to know how Buena Park Neighbors wants me to vote. So that's the official position of Buena Park Neighbors. So Alderman, if you could speak about the process briefly, that would be much appreciated.
Thank you so much, Alex. Good evening, everyone. Every alderman has a different process that they use to get feedback from the community. And the process that I have has been there for about 10 years. And this is an unusual process in that most wards rely on the local neighborhood organization to make the decision. For projects that are valued at $10 million or more, I go before the entire 46th ward. There are over 30 different representatives in the 46th Ward Zoning Development Committee. And because 25% of the ward residents have low incomes, then 25% of the 46th Ward Zoning Development Committee represent that group as well. I put in the chat that discusses at length the process used for the 46th Ward Zoning Development Committee, just in case that you have any questions. But people often come to me to give me their input. I will say this, I really want you to provide your feedback to your zoning representative. The 46th Ward is very diverse, and there are some areas where there's very high density, and there's other areas where there's not so much. And so areas of higher density have greater representation. The area that you're in has more representation than areas like Sheridan Park, for instance. So if you have any feedback, make sure you let your particular zoning representative know. If you don't know who your zoning representative is, please contact my office. You can Google James 46 and it will lead you to my website, where you can contact me either by phone, through my website, or through email. Or you can sign up to speak with me personally via Zoom. But we really want to hear your feedback. So with that, I will turn it back over to Alex.
Wonderful. Thank you, Alderman. Appreciate the synopsis of how it works. So without further ado, I will stand out of the way of Mr. Acosta. Rolando, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Good evening.
Glad you could join us this evening. So Rolando, I will turn it over to you. We have your presentation that you sent us. Nick will go through that and get that started, and then we'll turn it over to you. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending this meeting. It's a pleasure to be back. before Buena Park Neighbors. We started with you many moons ago, it seems, having gone through a pandemic in between. And so we're happy to be here. In between, Alex, as you mentioned, there was a period where some people felt like we were silent. We weren't really doing nothing during that period. We did have a series of meetings with individual buildings across the way. Park Place, Lake Park Condominium had its own town hall and invited many of the surrounding buildings. We had a meeting with the Bittersweet neighbors. And right after we saw Buena Park back pre-pandemic, we also saw the folks at the Paddington. In addition to that, we had our initial proposal reviewed at the federal level by the, well, at first at the state level by the Historic Preservation Division of the state. And that was then forwarded to the National Park Service to review the proposal. We wanted to make sure that what we were suggesting was going to conform to the federal landmark that is on the site. And we undertook what's known as a blue sheet review, which is a preliminary review. That came back positive, saying that they would support a proposal like we were showing them at the time, which is similar to what you're going to see today. After that, we went to the city's Department of Planning and Development. They went through a massing exercise to try to determine what would be the best shape of a building to be located on this parking lot. They also did their own landmark review of the city's landmark to make sure that what we were proposing would be conforming to the city's landmark process. Having gotten positive response from the Department of Planning and Development, both its zoning, planning, and landmark divisions, well, that's when we started the community process again, because we felt it was unfair to come to you with something if the initial reviews by the government were going to be negative. With that, what I'd like to do tonight, and I think Nick was going to let me share screens, but if not,
Rolando, you should be able to now.
okay. Hopefully everyone can now see my screen. Oh, not yet. Now you should be able to see my screen. Can you see my screen? Someone tell me yes or no. Okay, thank you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly walk you through some of the background that others may have seen. I'm going to do it quickly because you know your neighborhood and many of you may have seen this proposal. And then we gathered a series of questions and comments as we went through the various meetings. And we have answers to those questions and comments today, as well as a revised proposal. So I will be showing you that as we go through. And as I go through the presentation, I'm going to hopefully answer all of the questions and comments that we received, but Alex, I'm going to focus to some extent on the main questions that you sent forward. So with that, I will start going through this. I should want to take one more preliminary step. I have a series of people from our project team with us tonight, specifically Keith Giles, the developer, and Ryan Karen, who's partners with Keith on the senior building. I also have Roy Danoon, who is a wind expert. Some people raise concerns about wind. It's kind of an esoteric topic, so I thought I would bring Roy along to answer those questions. And lastly, I should have Louis Abuna, who should have joined us. He is the traffic consultant who undertook the traffic study. I'll introduce the topics, then when questions come up, they will be available to answer questions. I believe someone from the architectural team, perhaps Ramu, is also joining us. So with that, I'll start going through the presentation. I think you're all familiar with the site, the corner of Marine and Irving Park, with frontage also on Bittersweet. Just a little background on the development team. Keith has 30 years experience, has received various awards for many different projects, including receiving some landmark awards for adaptive reuses of buildings, among which are the old Colony building that is shown in the lower left-hand corner of the screen. Keith undertook a redevelopment of that with CA, who is the employer of Ryan in this case, but a different division. And they did an adaptive reviews, converting that into residential. He also developed recently the building at 1140 South Wabash. That was a city-owned parcel. It was purchased from the city, also developed in concert with CA. CA Senior Living, which is now called Anthology, is an experienced and has many units throughout the country in terms of senior living. And they have developed in many different states. And they have developed also some buildings that are of similar magnitude to the one proposed. Ryan is here, Ryan Karen from CA. He can answer some specifics if you have them with respect to their operation. Immaculata High School, you all know very well, started in 1921, was built, the main building was built in 22, designed by Barry Burns. It is a city and federal landmark. The additions to it were also designed by Barry Burns in the 50s. Initially, the high school held about 700 students. With the additions, it grew to about 1,200 students in the mid 60s and then declined, closing in 1981. Today, the site is owned by the American Islamic College, which is proposing to sell it to the development team. Site itself has about 143,000 square feet of land, approximately 3.3 acres. The proposed site of the new building would be the parking lot that is north of the existing building. There is a green space at the west end of that parking lot that's about 60 feet wide. I pointed out only because that is the edge, the western edge of the proposed new building. That green space would be kept as a green space, also provides a separation from the Paddington to the west. We can always come back. I'm trying to move quickly because this probably bores most of you and you want to get to the meat of the subject. The proposed building would be cited to be of an L shape, occupying the parking lot. The building will be approximately 200 feet from Park Place, approximately 500 feet from Lake Park condominiums. There is a 12-foot setback of the base building from the 3 flats along Bittersweet from 945 to 953, I believe, Bittersweet. There's about a 20-foot setback of the building from to the east from the 945 Bittersweet. And I may have that 645 Bittersweet building. You'll see this more clearly because there's some steps that have been incorporated into the design. You all know the parking lot, and this is a looking west along Bittersweet. Inside of Immaculata, some of the common areas like the hallways, the stairwells will be retained and restored. Basically, the classrooms will be converted to apartments. The auditorium will be retained and used for use by residents, and the gymnasium will be retained and converted to a physical fitness facility for the residents. In terms of zoning, currently zoned RT4, we would be proposing to zone to RM6, which is the predominant lakefront zoning. RM6 and RM6.5 are the predominant lakefront zonings. We are significantly less dense than some of those designations would allow in terms of unit count, as well as in terms of FAR. But yet we have to get to the RM6 because we are slightly above the RM5 FAR designation. This is just more of a land use showing the pattern along the lakefront. You see the red is RM6.5, which is the highest residential designation. The orange is the RM6. What we're proposing, it's one step down from the RM6.5. The green is the RT4 areas. There's a couple of steps before you get to that under the zoning code. And now to the basic footprint of the building. First thing to note here is that the building itself, the upper floors of the building are L-shaped. That was based on much input from the Department of Planning and Development. It gave the building sort of the smallest profile, the narrowest footprint possible. It is separated from Bittersweet by 50 feet. So to the north line of the building, there's a 50-foot setback. As I said previously, there's a 20-foot setback to the west. There are 2 steps in the back. So where it says 5th floor roof, that's above the 4th floor. This is a 4-story portion. It's about 48 feet tall. That is approximately the height of the addition to the Immaculata building immediately to its south. The next step in it is, it says 6th floor roof, that's above a 5th floor. That's approximately the height of the pitched roof on the main Immaculata building. And then in the dark black outline is the upper floors of the building that rise. We have made 2 significant changes that I will alert you to now, and you'll see clearer in the elevations. We have reduced the height of this building. We have taken 4 floors out of it, a total of 54 feet of height. We've also reduced the program in terms of unit count to get to 460 units. We were previously at 495 units. I'll talk more about that as we go through. This shows the main envisioned pedestrian connections. We have created a connection that would allow people to walk from Bittersweet across the campus to Irving Park without having to go all the way around the block. And also, obviously, you can get out to Marine Drive from the Immaculata buildings or through the campus or along Bittersweet. The main entrance to the senior building is envisioned to be off of Bittersweet at the northern edge here. The main entrances to the Immaculata residences would be off of Irving Park, as well as off of Marine near the Bittersweet corner. Vehicular circulation, which I'm sure will be much discussed today. So we've taken an approach of thinking about trying to use all of the entrances and access points that we have, understanding the concerns of the Bittersweet neighbors about traffic on Bittersweet. So essentially what we are proposing is that all service and employee vehicles, and to the extent that we can talk residents into using the Marine Drive access, that will be the access. So employees will be directed to use the Marine Drive access. Service vehicles coming to the site will be instructed to use the Marine Drive access. For those of you who asked about construction, all construction vehicles that fit will use the Marine Drive access point. There is a bridge connecting the addition to the original L-shaped building. That bridge allows about a 13.5-foot clear, and it's about 12 feet wide at the base. 13.5 is sort of one of our lower viaducts in the city of Chicago, but workable. 12 feet wide is sort of a wide traffic lane. So we think that works. We've also going to alter its circulation. Today it's unrestricted. People could come in or out via Marine Drive. We're going to make it inbound only to create a circulation pattern that takes you in off of Marine. You can circle through the parking lot here and then go out to Bittersweet and head east. That minimizes the flow for the western length of Bittersweet through the project. We're also going to use there's a surface lot that has about 20 spaces in it. We are going to use that surface lot for rideshare, figuring it would be convenient to pull them off the street so they don't block a lane of traffic, picking up and dropping off. It's also near the main Immaculata entrance and does provide a connection back to the senior building. Try to encourage this to be the rideshare entrance location. We are also going to proposing to have some car sharing to cut down on the amount of parking demand. And I'll talk about parking momentarily, but the car share location is envisioned to be on the Irving Park lot. Presumably that could also be open to neighborhood residents because they would probably be through one of the services, not exclusive to the building. Parking, which you can access both from Marine and Bittersweet, is in the back of the new building between the building and Immaculata, there's about a 33-foot separation between Immaculata and the edge of the building here, and it goes to about 12 feet where the parking ramp exists. I'm trying to go quickly so that you get most time for questions and comments, and our experts if you wish to talk to them. This just shows the separation of the floors from the building throughout. Again, that 5th floor roof terrace, 6th floor roof terrace, you can see now the shape and footprint of the upper floors. It's an approximately 13,000 square foot footprint, rather narrow, rather tight. trying to create as much separation as possible from the adjacent buildings. An aerial view, just to give you a sense of the courtyard, upper right-hand corner, the passage between the parking and Immaculata, and then the green space that essentially is the green space that exists today that will be retained. In terms of separation from the Paddington, the building itself, its western wall to the eastern wall of the Paddington is about 128 feet. The other 60 in the green space and approximately another 60 or so as you take those 2 steps to the 6th floor. Here you'll start to see the differences in our proposed change in height. So this is the original building as shown to the community post the Buena Park Neighbors meeting, but after we came out of the Department of Planning and Development's review. It is a 27-story building, had a 314-foot height to the top of the building. This is the revised building. It's come down to about 260 feet, 54 feet from the top of the building. I'll talk about the materials when I get to a further view in a moment. This image really lets you see them side by side. So we think it's a fairly dramatic effect. We are coming close to the height of the building at the corner of Bittersweet and Marine, which is about 230 feet, give or take, to its roof. Again, I'm going to take you through some views as we move around. This is the before view at the 27 stories, 314 feet of height. This is the after view at the current 260. From an aesthetic perspective, and the aesthetics are still preliminary, so feel free to comment. I'm sure you will. The thought is to have a masonry cladding at the base of this building to mirror sort of the Immaculata and the nature of the neighborhood, and then to have a lighter tower above, primarily of glass, to sort of lighten it and differentiate it from the base building and the Immaculata buildings. You can see on this image the separation of 50-foot setback on the front. That area obviously will be landscaped other than where it provides a driveway in, and does give some relief to the 3 flats that are immediately to our west. This is side by side, before and after. This is Park Place. This is Lake Park condominiums. Obviously the building on the corner. The Irving Park view. This shows a very preliminary design of the building. We didn't generate this view once we altered the design. Looking straight east behind Immaculata. The new design and the new height of 23 stories. We have reduced the senior building to 210 total units. That's 118 independent living units. It is 60, if I remember correctly, assisted living units and 32 memory care units. The Immaculata apartments have been reduced to 200 apartments from 265. That's a total of 35 unit reduction. Our parking has remained at 118, which is what fits in the current base of this building. That would be shared among, well, it's 99 in the building to be clear, and there's 20 spaces in the surface parking lot that you see here on this image. Before and after. Shadow studies. We actually had them previously, but we've now generated also the before and after. What's interesting when you look at the shadow studies is you see in brown is the new shadow overlaying the gray shadow, which is the existing shadow. This is the summer months. you can see the notch in the building that represents the base. When we ran the base with respect to the buildings that are most proximate, any base of about 4 stories caused about the same shadow. The upper levels you can see here, and this will become more obvious when we get to the spring/fall, is some changed to some degree, but it's mostly overlaying existing shadows. What is also notable, and this is true about all the shadow studies, the shadow impact is in the 9 to 11 roughly time period. By noon, because of the orientation of the sun, the shadow is headed straight north. It in the summer barely crosses Bittersweet. And obviously in the afternoon, the shadows point towards the east, so away from our neighbors. This is spring and fall. It's the equinox. The sun is in the same position both in March and September. You can see again the base right here versus the upper floors. The upper floors are really crossing Bittersweet in either direction, headed to this U-shaped apartment building northwest of us. Again, you notice that by noon, we are beyond all of the buildings other than the one on the corner. And the other, and by the afternoon, the shadow was again headed in a northeasterly direction. Among the questions we were asked was the need for senior housing. So we looked at the senior housing approximately 2 miles north, 2 miles south, over to Damon Avenue, give or take about 1.5 miles going west, and looked for comparable buildings. We found a series of buildings that are senior housing, but senior housing has many different types of units within it. So we looked at buildings that had, first of all, independent living units, which we have in the building. We looked for those that also had additional services and built of recent vintage, say in the last 50 years or so. And we came across 4 buildings that exist that would meet that profile. The Breakers to the extreme north of Foster, which is an all independent living building with 470 some units. The Admiral, which is immediately south of Foster at Marine, that has assisted living as well as independent living units. And it has a total of 197 independent units, close to 250 total units. And then 2 Brookdale buildings that are near Diversey. One is on Lakeview and the other one is on Lakeshore Drive, although it's west of the park in this particular case. And both of those have both independent living units as well as assisted living units. They don't have any memory care. We looked at just for general information, the uptown population, according to CMAP, Community Snapshot, is 58,000 people. Approximately 18% of them are in the 50 to 60 years of age, which is coming to senior population. I happen to be in that range towards the tail end, I'm sorry to say. But there's also approximately 190,000 people in the zip codes. 60613 is the resident zip code for this location, but 640 is proximate north, 60657 is proximate south, and all 3 zip codes end at Damon, which is why Damon became a relevant statistical area. You'll note that it's very obvious from this map, there's a gap in the middle in Uptown. As I mentioned previously, only one of the building, which is the Admiral, has any memory care. And 3 of the 4 buildings, the Breakers and Brookdales, both of them at the south, are over 30 years old. This obviously will be a modern, post-COVID, technologically savvy building with modern air handling equipment, as well as all of the needed amenities for modern life, which we think makes it somewhat unique in the marketplace. Wind, and soon you can hear from Roy, who is really the expert. So there was questions about wind coming from the proposed building off-site, primarily on Irving Park, but also along Bittersweet, as well as impact on buildings nearby. So we retain Roy DeNoon. He's with CPP. They're a nationally known expert in the field of wind. Roy is the vice president for wind loads and effects. He did an initial review of the proposal and said that basically because of various conditions, there's really no appreciable offsite impact. Among these factors is that the dominant winds come from the southwest. So they're blocked as they get to our site by Park Place, Lake Park condominium. The northeast winds, those are also the strongest winds. For those of you who were feeling blown off the sidewalks of Irving, it's usually probably occurring in the winter months when the southwesterly winds are most dominant and they're the strongest. Northeasterly winds are less common. They occur in the spring and summer. We have partial blockage because of the building at Marine and Bittersweet, but because of how this is situated on the site, and this is why I created these images, wind tends to float across the top of buildings. So really offsite effects are not to be expected. Also by having the base, as you saw, that's larger than the floors above, that base absorbs some of the downwash off of the building and lets it then sort of bounce off among the rooftops before hitting the ground. Separation from existing buildings is important. And as I said previously, we're well separated from the buildings to the south of Irving Park, and we are separated, and there's some landscaping in the terraces that help shield the buildings to our northwest along Bittersweet. Roy is available. I am not a traffic expert. I've learned everything I know from him. So you can feel free to ask him questions after this presentation. We were asked about sewer capacity and electrical capacity. So for sewer, we retained Erickson Engineering, which again is an experienced local firm. They reviewed the sewer situation. The bottom line answer to the sewer, both sanitary sewer as well as storm sewer, is the city of Chicago has a stormwater ordinance, and it will currently there's no stormwater detention on site. The ordinance will require us to maintain the effluent out of the site the same as it is today. So that will be achieved by having underground, primarily underground detention tanks that will hold water on site so that we don't discharge the sewers any more than gets discharged today, particularly in major rain events. There's also some features that are incorporated into the building to assist with this, things like low flow faucets and the like, that will be incorporated into both buildings that will assist, and some landscaping treatments can help, but primarily detention is provided below grade as required and monitored by the city of Chicago. For electric service, essentially the bottom line answer to electric service is to the extent there isn't sufficient service, the developer has to pay for the upgrades. There is an electric vault on Bittersweet that only serves the building at Marine and Bittersweet. That is the likely source of electric power. For those who are concerned about the pole line behind the Bittersweet buildings, those on the south side of Bittersweet, that line will be, for our purposes, we're currently taking the Immaculata buildings, take power from that line. It crosses the parking lot. That line that provides Immaculata will be disconnected and incorporated into the balance of the Immaculata service from Bittersweet without altering, touching, or affecting the service to the Bittersweet neighbors who rely on it. This is also true of cable, which is provided on the same poles. The poles are actually on the Immaculata property and would remain. Environmental sustainability, some asked. So obviously preserving an existing landmark building is very sustainable by reusing existing structures and cutting down on landfill. Infilling in an urban area is sustainable because it cuts back on urban sprawl, and it also is using a parking lot which is already paved, so we're not taking green space to build this building. This is a transit-oriented development, also helping with sustainability by cutting down on the carbon footprint. Sustainability features that are to be included in the building And again, there's some of these are regulated by and required by the city of Chicago, but working landscape incorporating native species, ample bike parking, electric charging stations, obviously improved windows, both on Immaculata and electrical systems, both on Immaculata and the new building, construction waste diversion to try to keep as much out of landfills as possible, LED lights, I mentioned the low flow fixtures, and then using white roofs and to some extent green roofs to mitigate the heat island. So these are some of the features that will be incorporated into the building and the rehab. One of the key topics is traffic, and I'll also talk about parking demand at this point. So as you all know, this is a high transit location. The map to the right shows the existing bus line and train lines that serve the immediate area, acknowledging that the two easternmost lines that are running along sort of in a kind of a bright green color along Lakeshore Drive are bypass lines, but all of the others, the 145, 146, 135, the 36 bus, the Sheridan stop, all are available transit facilities that can be used, and this is envisioned as a transit-oriented development. Part of the reason for the uses and the way that the proposal was conceived was actually focusing on traffic from the beginning. So first of all, turning Immaculata into apartments, generally one bedrooms and studios, that tends to generate less traffic and less parking demand. Similarly, a senior building as opposed to a non-senior apartment building, average age of the independent living residents is approximately 70 years old, not the same propensity to use vehicles or travel as younger individuals. So that helps reduce both parking demand and reduce traffic demand. Specifically with respect to parking, we've looked at it various different ways without taking into account what are known as reductions for transit served locations. So by zoning ordinance, if I run a ratio, you should know that first of all, the rehab of Immaculata does not require parking under the city's current zoning ordinance because it is a landmark and there's an exemption for landmarks. But understanding that practically speaking, others may think parking is required, and I'll touch on that. So then calculating the parking based on just the zoning code as applied to the new building, we would need 77 spaces. We're providing 118. We believe, based on our research, the development team's research, that our demand for parking will be closer to 10 to 15% for the units, so a 0.1 to a 0.15 on the apartments, the Immaculata building, because of the transit nature of the facility, because of the nature of the units. And so that would generate about 25 parking spaces at a 0.1. For the independent living units, which are the ones who are relevant for the parking calculation, employees are treated separately, and I'll cover that. At a 0.2, about 20% of the units we anticipate would have a demand for parking, so that's 24 spaces. And then employees, there are a total of 70 or so employees on site, but they're broken down into 3 shifts. And the shifts are specifically done to avoid peak hour on the streets. So peak traffic hours on the street are 7:45 a.m. to 8:45 a.m. And I believe it's 4 to 5 or 4:30 to 5:30 in the afternoon. Those are basically all the calculations that Louis does in his traffic study are focused on the peak hour, on the theory that if you can handle the peak hour, you can handle the rest. So employees run on a 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. shift, avoiding the turnover of employees during that peak hour, on a 2 to 10 shift, and then a 10 to 6 shift. So that purposely takes the employees. The single largest shift is in that 2 to 10 shift, which is 25 employees. CA's anthologies experience is about 50% in a transit location like this of the employees will drive to work. The other 50% will use transit. So if I take 25, divide by half, that's 13. that generates a total parking demand of about 62 spaces. So I had 77 spaces under code, 62 spaces by practical experience. If you raise those ratios, you can go to 87. We also looked at the Brookdale Lakeshore Drive, one of the 4 buildings I mentioned, as a potential comp. We also were able to get parking counts from them. So Brookdale has 337 units. 271 of those are IL, 66 and 66 assisted living. They have no memory care. They have 105 parking spaces. So using their ratio, it's about a 31% of the total, and we are at a higher ratio. That translates to about 65 spaces in the garage. This is a very long way of saying that by at least all of the ratios we've looked at, all the analysis we've done, we think we have sufficient parking at 118. We also believe we may have excess parking, which would benefit the neighbors of Bittersweet. And to the extent that we have excess parking, we are happy to make that available to the neighbors along Bittersweet. There's a van for seniors that would cut down on the need for cars, also cut down on the need for trips during the middle of the day or at peak hours. As I mentioned previously, we're going to use the multiple points of access with the marine access being converted in and outbound, the car sharing, and the ride share that I mentioned previously. To look at the traffic generated, we hired Louis Buena of KLOA, which is a premier local traffic expert. They perform counts during COVID. Alex, you mentioned that earlier, but we've had those now calibrated based on historical CDOT counts for the area to adjust for COVID conditions. In the CDOT counts were also Cub game counts to account for Cub game conditions, which I know were of concern to individuals. Louis is here. He can answer questions, but generally speaking, he also accounted for general growth in background traffic. So assuming traffic is ever increasing at some rate, he applies a rate to it, applies the proposed generation from the site to the area traffic, and comes up with conclusions as to the impact on the intersections. The key conclusions of the study are that because of the urban context and the available alternative modes of transportation, the amount of trips generated from such a development would be decreased. And this did not account for the fact that we're really a senior building. It really accounted more for urban and existing transit. So it's conservative in that regard. The development traffic that crosses the Irving and Marine intersections, the 2 intersections I highlighted, one is Irving Park and Marine, is less than 2% of the total, not really causing an appreciable change in that intersection's functioning. The Bittersweet and Marine intersection is a 3% impact, or at least about a 5-second impact on the operation of the signal. Again, not a significant impact. And all intersections operate at design capacity. I will note that we saw in the traffic study, and it's very clear, that most of the volume on Bittersweet is in the morning hour. Most of that volume is bypass traffic that is making a left turn from southbound Clarendon onto Bittersweet, ignoring the signage. We've been trying to think of ways of improving that situation. I think there were 200 cars counted on Bittersweet during the morning peak hour. Of the 200 cars counted, about 180 of them were Clarendon left turners onto Bittersweet. So that is most of the traffic. At the afternoon peak hours, or even Cub games, the volume on Bittersweet is significantly lower. So the morning peak hour, which I'm sure many of you who live on Bittersweet have experienced, is the more critical point. We add very little to that traffic. Obviously, having seniors on site, people who are familiar with it, individuals who don't necessarily have to leave at a given time, there would be some tendency to avoid the peak hour altogether and further lower any volume coming off site. That, in combination with the van service everyone being instructed to take the Marine Drive entrance. Any deliveries, pickups, service to the vehicle, to the buildings will also be scheduled to occur off-peak. So essentially trying to take advantage of the capacity that's there once you get past that 9 o'clock hour in the morning and before the 4 o'clock hour or so in the afternoon. We were asked about project benefits. And here are some that we identified. So it's a high quality senior building in an area, as one of the earlier graphics showed, that is in demand, has a gap for the use. It allows for seniors who may live in your neighborhood to actually age in their neighborhood because there is no comparable facility to this one. It also allows for those of you who may have aging relatives and you want to have them close to you, to have those relatives close to your neighborhood. So it's a benefit for residents who want to age. It's also a building where you can age within the building, moving in as an independent living, into an independent living unit, and if necessary, to an assisted or memory care unit. It puts the property, this property is currently tax exempt, so it puts it on the tax rolls at approximately $2 million in property tax revenue a year. It provides residents as well as employees that can help support the area retail. It provides jobs, approximately 70 jobs from the staff on site, at least in the senior building. It retains, we believe we will have extra parking, so it gives some availability to Bittersweet residents to rent in the area. I will note that I looked around, there seems to be some parking available at Park Place. There seems to be some parking available at Waterford, some monthly and some at 720 Gordon Terrace. My mother used to actually live there. And at least from an hourly basis that is available, but in some cases it also looked like there was monthly parking available. And we do provide 38 affordable units on site, of which 13 are affordable senior units, which are also important for the community. The other 25 are in the Immaculata building as part of that development. That actually concludes my presentation. I am happy to go back and show a slide if someone has a question, but would like to open it up for your questions. And I thank you for your time.
Hey, Rolando, could we actually stop screen sharing? That way we can get you and your team up there so we can get everybody on the screen at the same time. Perfect.
There you go.
All right. And who else is on your team, Rolando, so I can get them up
Sure.
here?
So I have Keith Giles.
Giles, let's see where you are. Okay. Is that Keith with a K?
Keith with a K.
Let's see.
I saw him.
There he is. All right. And who else do we
Roy
have?
Denoon. That's R-O-Y and D-E-N-O-O-N.
Right. And who's next?
Luay, L-U-A-Y, Abuna, A-B-O-O-N-A.
Okay.
And Ryan Karen with a C, C-A-R-R-O-N.
Is that
I
everyone?
think that's everyone. I'm looking to see if, there's a Ramu, R-A-M-U.
All right. And for those who are going to be on, please put your videos on so we can add you to the spotlight here. I believe I just would need Louis to put his camera on. There we go. Perfect. All right. Is that everybody?
It is everyone. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, Rolando. Thank you guys for being here. It's it's very informative, and I know the neighborhood is, as you can see in some of the chat, has a lot of questions to ask, and we're hoping we can just get a little more in-depth knowledge here from you guys. So let's just jump right in. A constituent asks, with the size of the lot, why does it seem like they're trying to force this large building into this lot when there are other vacant lots around the area?
It's, well, we don't really consider it to be a large building with a 13,000 square foot footprint. It is a very good reuse of this parking lot. It is sort of a environmentally friendly approach to it, to urban infill, and it does bring residents, senior residences, to a neighborhood that we believe needs them.
Okay, awesome. Another constituent asks, what apartments are going to be at the market rate, or are going to have some kind of affordable component with it? And what exactly is that going to look like? And is that going to affect parking again?
So the way that it works is we follow the city of Chicago's affordable housing ordinance. It requires 10% of the units. And for purposes of affordable housing, it would be the independent living units in the senior building and all of the units in Immaculata. So that's 368 units total. We would have to provide 10% of those on site as affordable. The amount of rent and the income of the renter is regulated by the city of Chicago. It's keyed to 60% of the median income. And then it's done by unit size. The city actually publishes a table that tells you what that rent can be and how much the renter can earn as a family unit, obviously sized by bedrooms, and checks on the disbursement of the units as well as the sizes relative to percentages. So you have to have roughly the same percentage of studios affordable, it's roughly the same percentage of 1 bedrooms affordable, roughly the same percentage of 2 bedrooms affordable as you do market rate. In terms of the individual renter, it's any individual out in the public who qualifies would be an available renter. So there's not a list you're taking from to do this.
Okay, and a follow-up to that, to this question was, would you be willing to increase the bare minimum for affordable housing?
It's kind of difficult because it seriously starts to affect economics of the project. So we're trying to balance a bunch of different things, costs of construction and development with market conditions, with making the building not too big because we hear the concerns of the neighbors. And so all of that is in a carefully crafted formula that we believe works at the 10%.
Awesome, awesome. Another constituent asks, what are going to be the hours of construction? Is that going to include large cranes, heavy machinery, and how is that going to impact the neighborhood?
So hours of construction are regulated by the city of Chicago. I believe you cannot use machinery before 8 a.m. I think you can start at 7, but you have to hold off on machinery. And I believe you have to shut down around 5 or 6 in the afternoon. There will be a crane on site for the building itself, but that's really a slender tower that's connected and then has a boom across the top of it that rises material. There is no pounding. For those of you who live near sheet piling being driven that has a incessant noise, there's none of that. This will be caissons, which are drilled and are much quieter. The noisy part of construction is roughly a 6-month process as the building gets put up. Once you're working inside, there's much less noise. We will try to, all the trucks that fit will come through Bittersweet. Occasionally there will be some large trucks delivering materials. Will come from Marine in that entrance. Some larger trucks will have to come down Bittersweet. We also plan on using the Irving Park lot as a staging area. Again, everything is focused on trying to divert what traffic we can from Bittersweet and bringing it in and using the space on site for locating it.
Thanks for answering that. Another question comes about regarding the health concerns with having a senior building here. And they're wondering if it is reviewed for pandemic proof. Seeing in the past, certain senior centers or senior living, assisted living had to deal with issues during the pandemic. God forbid this were to come again. Are there measures in place to work with that?
So one of the advantages that we see, we're the, sort of a building built post-pandemic. So all that is now taken into account in the air handling systems for the building, whereas prior buildings were not doing that. So certainly we're going to be following regulations and best practices in terms of designing and building this building. We see it as a positive, the fact that we have put in this extra kind of mechanical systems in this building compared to some of the other buildings that will have to retrofit.
Thanks, Rolando. And I guess this question touches back to a little one before we asked a little bit earlier. Will there be any 2-bedroom units? Will families be allowed to move into any of this area or be family friendly who want to move into the neighborhood?
I think there are. I think there's a few. It's predominantly, in terms of Immaculata, it's predominantly studios and 1-bedrooms. I think there may be a few 2-bedrooms. We're trying to work with, if you think of it, their classrooms we're trying to convert to units. So there are some limitations on it. And I can't remember in the senior building if there are 2-bedrooms. If Ryan is on, he could answer as to the senior.
Great. And the excessive extra parking that you guys are going to have, is that going to be available for any residents within the area, residents down the street? Who can apply for that parking?
So, it's really up to you. We were thinking that we would give, I'm going to call it first dibs. This is Chicago. We know about dibs. To the bittersweet neighbors, because they are the ones who actually have no parking, many of them, just because of the configuration of that street. But realistically, if there wasn't enough demand there or somebody wished us to be broader, happy to do it.
Okay. And just to touch back on the slides, could you send this around to us, or is this available for us to send out to our members so everybody can have that on hand? I'm sure things might change in the future, but at least for this current set of slides you have.
So this, what I typically have done previously is provided the slide deck to the alderman's office, who I believe puts it on his website, and then people can just take it from the website. If that's acceptable, that's probably the easiest way to do it. In terms of Buena Park, you guys have it because I sent you one earlier.
And would that be fine for us to send it out to our members?
Yeah, we're not here to hide things.
Great. All right. Let's see here. Sorry, guys, a lot of questions to go through, a lot of concerned community members. So there has been a couple concerns addressing that there seems to be more senior living in the area than previously addressed. Are you able to speak to that, or is more research needed to be done, or is this just like a miscommunication here?
So I think it's a definitional issue. So there's clearly more buildings that people could consider senior in the area than the 4 I identified. I'll give you an example. The Artist, it's ARTIS building that's on Ashland. I think it's right by Addison. It's a relatively new building. It is a senior building, but it is all assisted living and memory care. So it has no independent living component to it. So we thought that's not really a comparable because it's a very different type of facility. Belmont Village is another one that just doesn't seem to be comparable because I think they're mostly assisted living and memory care. So we were looking specifically for buildings, starting with the independent living units. And the reason for that is obviously it's typically a younger population. And also the one from those of you who wanted to talk about traffic, more likely to have a car, more likely to drive. So we thought that was more comparable. So, I mean, I can tell you, we've looked 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. We identified 12 buildings going as far west as California, as far north as Foster or the Breakers call it, and as far south as the Diversey area that I previously mentioned. But when we went through the buildings themselves, we found that many of these were either smaller. There's one in Lincoln Park, for example, primarily assisted living, right on Clark Street, just south of Diversey. So those are why, that may be why some people are thinking there's more buildings, and we're saying there's really 4.
Great. In regards to the traffic studies, how did you guys go ahead to determine peak hours as 7:45? Some constituents here say that traffic starts building up as early as 6:45, 7 a.m. and can go far into 9 a.m. as well as in the evening can go until 4:30 to possibly even 6:30 to 7.
So it's a mathematical calculation based on the sort of trends in the area. I can't specifically tell you how they determine peak hour, but they do counts, and it's presumably the 1 hour period of time with the highest counts would be your peak. So it could tail off and build up, but we're really trying to find that middle road, that middle hour with the highest volume. Every so often I drive Lakeshore Drive, and you can sort of see what happens as it builds up. But peak hour, it's closer to Hollywood, Bryn Mawr in terms of backup, and then it starts to quell again as you get closer to 9.
And a follow-up to this is as normalcy kind of returns, is there plans to do more traffic studies as life kind of starts to return?
So what will happen is, first of all, we will take our study and submit it to CDOT. So you don't have to rely on us at the end of the day. CDOT will be reviewing our work that has not been completed yet. And so they will look at their history. We've done it already. We secured numbers from CDOT to try to balance the COVID conditions. And so we have some of their numbers, but they will review all of the evaluation that Louis has done and then make determinations and then make recommendations. The traffic study itself is mostly it's a numbers analysis. It's an engineering type of analysis that is performed. I think it's like 140 pages long with all the data. So they'll look at all of that and give us their, blessing or comments, which we are happy to share with you and anybody else.
Great. So we have roughly 5 minutes left, everyone. So we can probably do about maybe 2 or 3 more questions. We don't want to take everybody's evening, but so we're just gonna keep going, but just wanted to make you all aware of that. Another constituent asked, how long before the senior living can be converted to another kind of unit or the zoning can be changed?
So this will be a planned development, and that in theory goes on forever unless somebody changes it. And if you were to change it from senior living to, I don't know, regular apartments, condominiums, you'd have to go through a process similar to this so that it can then be evaluated. So we cannot, the zoning will be fixed. So there's no bait and switch possibility.
Perfect. Hold on. All right. Affordable. Sorry about that. The messages just keep coming in here, so I'm just trying to check the questions.
Well, and one thing I was going to say, if Buena Park Neighbors gets additional comments or questions post this meeting, feel free. You have my email. Feel free to contact me. I'm happy to keep answering questions so people don't feel like they're limited to exactly 8:15. We still have some process to go, and so we will keep responding and answering questions and taking your comments and doing what we can to address them throughout.
Another question here is a constituent on Bittersweet has a concern with a privacy issue with the building being so close to some of the buildings there, so close to their balconies. It seems like there might be just 12 feet apart from possibly their balconies on some of the buildings. Is there any way to address that, or what would be a way to remedy that?
Okay, so if we're talking about the base of the building in terms of sort of the rear of the Bittersweet, there's three flats that are immediately northwest of us. We are about 12 feet separated from that property line. That's the garage portion of the building. And so you have to get above those buildings before you have sort of the first occupied floor. And I guess you'd have to look down, kind of a steep look down to impose on their privacy in their backyard. But you're not going to have a window to window direct look because you're going to be above them.
All right. And another concern, again, this goes back to traffic. Was that traffic study taking in possible visitors for the seniors, as well as the construction that's going to be happening on Lakeshore Drive?
So it takes in the visitors for the seniors. It doesn't take in the construction because that's obviously a, temporary phenomena that we all have to deal with when it occurs, but it does take in, it's basically the traffic expected to be generated by the project. And again, it wasn't necessarily focused on seniors. It was done more as apartments. So to the extent that we believe seniors is less traffic generating than regular apartments, it's a conservative analysis.
And another constituent concerns is there any plan for retail to be in this building in any capacity?
No.
And again, just to reinstate for people who maybe weren't on here earlier, were other locations considered for this possible project within the area, or was this the only viable area?
No, this was, the property was available. This looked like a great location for the concept. So hence, this is our proposal. It also helps us, the combination of the two, I should say, because obviously Immaculata needs some love and care. The senior building helps with the funding. So we can balance a financial equation, like I mentioned earlier. By having the senior building, it facilitates the rehabilitation of Immaculata from a financial perspective.
And again, with the zoning, there wouldn't be a way to rezone this senior living or apartment in the future, so there won't be a possible retailing or, again, rezoning the senior living.
The zoning is determined by the city of Chicago, so I can't really guarantee you what the city of Chicago would do. But all I can guarantee you is that once the plan development is in place, we would, if we wanted to do it, we'd have to go through a process. If the city wanted to do it, we'd have to go through essentially the same process that we're going through today.
Great. And just for one last question, again, for those, if I didn't get to your question, I apologize. There's a lot going on here, but this will not be the last town hall. We're going to have more time to discuss this. And this could possibly be a question even for the alderman. Sorry about that, where I lost it here. Well, can any of these studies be sent to the alderman or be sent to Buena Park that we can send out maybe a little more in depth, whether it's the wind study, the shade study, the light study, the traffic study, just so the neighborhood could get a little more details about this?
The answer is yes. We plan to lodge the studies. The wind study we have, the traffic study, we'd like to run it through CDOT and then submit it. But, again, we're not here to hide things. We send everything to the alderman's office, which posts it on his website, and then people can get it there. We're happy to simultaneously send it to Buena Park.
Perfect. Well, Ronaldo, thank you guys so much. We greatly appreciate you. We're getting close to that time. So I'm going to pass it over to Rosa for some of our closing remarks right here.
Hello, everyone. Thanks so much again for coming. Thank you, Rolando, for the presentation and for taking the time to answer some questions. Alderman Kappelman, thanks for joining us tonight. Alex, for putting this all together and going through the several feedback forms that we received. Each one has been read, and we're so happy that the neighborhood is, truly involved and, wants the best for everyone. Nick and Asher, thank you so much for helping out on the tech side and facilitating tonight's event. Please stay tuned with Buena Park Neighbors. You can find us on Facebook and follow us there. You can go to our website, buenaparkneighbors.org. There you can find our contact info. You can sign up for our newsletter that goes out monthly. And more importantly, you can become a member of Buena Park Neighbors Association. We'd love for you we'd love to have you. So please join us and have a good night.